Chosen ones, stop scrolling and feel the weight of this exact second. The moment your eyes locked onto that blazing 555 on the thumbnail, something electric shot through your spirit, didn't it? That wasn't random, that wasn't curiosity, that was the Holy Spirit himself arresting your attention, because in Scripture and in the life of every awakened believer, 555 is heaven's unmistakable trumpet of radical grace, earth-shaking change, and the divine shockwave that follows a single obedient choice. It is the biblical signature of undeserved favor, breaking every chain the moment God steps in and says, "Enough now, watch me move." Your finger clicked before your mind caught up, because your spirit already recognized the code, before the full revelation floods in and changes everything forever. Let's mark this holy moment together. Drop 555 in the comments right now, along with the city or country you are watching from, wherever the Holy Spirit has planted you on the earth, and watch the map of the radically favored light up across the nations. If tears are already rising and you know deep in your bones that this word is about you, let that fire move your hand. Plant a super thanks as an immediate act of worship and alignment with what heaven is releasing. Every seed you sow here becomes a weapon that arms the next chosen one to make the choice that shocks the angels all over again. Stay with me until the very last second, because the message the angels are still reeling from is about to be spoken over your life. Chosen one, they watched, and they were shocked by your choice. Now watch what God does next. Chosen ones, listen with every fiber of your spirit, because what I am about to tell you is not exaggeration or sentimental hype. It is the unfiltered truth of the unseen realm. Right now, in this exact moment, while you read these words, something extraordinary is happening in the courts of heaven. The countless multitudes of angels have suddenly fallen into an awed, breathless silence. Their endless songs have paused. Their wings, usually beating like thunder, have stilled. Every fiery eye is fixed in one direction, on you. They are not distracted by boredom or duty. They are stunned, absolutely stunned. They watched the moment you made that decision, and the entire spiritual realm trembled with the weight of what they witnessed. While millions around you quietly took the shortcut, the easier road, the path of least resistance, you stood your ground. While crowds chased comfort, validation, and instant reward, you chose the narrow, costly, tear-stained path of obedience. And the reverberation of that single yes to God rolled through dimensions like a sonic boom. You may have thought your quiet prayers in the dark, whispered through clenched teeth, and tears simply dissolved into the ceiling. You may have believed no one noticed when you turned away from temptation that would have been so easy to justify. But the exact opposite is true. In the unseen world, your obedience rang out louder than crashing thunder, clearer than 1,000 trumpets sounding at dawn. The angels turned to one another with wide, wondering eyes, the same way they must have looked at one another when a young virgin in Nazareth said, "Let it be to me according to your word." Or when a teenage boy in a lion's den refused to bow. Or when a carpenter's son on a blood-soaked cross declared, "It is finished." Picture it like this. Imagine a violent storm tearing across a midnight sea. Waves tower like mountains, winds scream like demons, ships are lost, compasses spin wildly, and thick darkness swallows every star. Then, far off on a jagged coastline, a single lighthouse ignites. One steady, defiant beam cuts through the chaos. Sailors who were certain they were doomed suddenly saw the way home. That lone light does not merely save one vessel, it becomes legend spoken of for generations. That is the magnitude of what your obedience just accomplished. It is not only a beacon for your own soul, it is a fixed point of light for your children. Your children's children and bloodlines you will never meet on this side of eternity. You are not ordinary. You never were. You are a rare jewel wrenched from the deepest mine of the earth, covered in centuries of dirt and pressure, yet now beginning to catch the light in ways that make even immortal beings catch their breath. The armies of heaven remember every time pride caused a fall, the morning star who reached too high, the first humans who doubted goodness itself, the ancient nation that repeatedly traded glory for golden calves. They have seen rebellion on a cosmic scale. Then, They look at you, frail, weary, heartbroken, sometimes barely able to stand, and they hear you whisper through tears, "I still choose God." And something inside their eternal hearts breaks open in wonder. They see the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead, burning quietly in a human heart that refuses to curse God and die. They see the image of the invisible God shining through cracked clay, and they can only stare in reverent silence. The Apostle Paul, writing under the fire of the Holy Spirit, gives the battle plan and the reason for the wonder in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where he urges, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Your refusal to conform when conformity would have been so much easier, your stubborn courage to walk a different direction when the crowd laughed or turned away, was undeniable proof that the very life of God pulses inside you. And heaven stood back in awe at how brightly you burned in a generation that prefers gray. Chosen ones never minimize what your obedience cost you, never undervalue those lonely 3 a.m. moments when no human voice applauded, when no phone lit up with encouragement, yet you still opened your Bible with trembling hands and said, "Not my will, but yours." Never dismissed the nights you chose forgiveness, when revenge would have tasted sweet, or the mornings you got back up after failure convinced you to stay down. Those moments were not invisible. They were cosmic. They were altars built on eternal ground, and every stone has already been recorded in books that will never fade. The throne room does not exaggerate. Angels do not fall silent for nothing. If all of heaven paused to watch you, if the hosts of glory still speak your name with trembling reverence, then the significance of what you just did is infinitely greater than your natural eyes can yet comprehend. You shifted bloodlines. You altered destinies. You sent shockwaves through principalities that have terrorized families for centuries. You became a living declaration that the power of the risen Christ still works in human weakness. And the same angels who watched Lucifer fall in pride now watch you rise in humility, and they cover their faces because the beauty is too much even for them. So lift your head, chosen ones. The silence you feel is not absence, it is attention. The hiddenness you walk in is not rejection, it is honor. Heaven itself has marked this moment, and the story is still being written in fire across the sky. What you thought was just another hard day was actually the day the unseen realm stood to applaud a warrior who refused to lay down the sword. Keep going. The best chapters, the loudest cheers, the fullest revelation of who you really are, they are all still ahead. And every being in the courts above is leaning forward, breathless, waiting to see what you will do next with this wild, glorious, heaven-shaking calling burning inside you. And here you stand, absorbing these words existing imprinted by fate. You may perceive yourself as vulnerable, but that very fragility has evolved into a powerful declaration. It communicates to every malevolent spirit, every ruling force, that even within mortal bodies, those selected by the divine can triumph. You embody the reality that illumination cannot be quenched. If this revelation touches your inner being, allow me to encourage you to act. Click the approval icon immediately as an indication that you commit to the course the Almighty has laid out. Distribute this content to an individual facing a comparable dilemma, since their upcoming verdict could be the one that next astonishes the heavenly hosts. And in the response section, enter the numeral 12. This serves as a symbolic reference to Romans 12:2, signifying your conviction that your perspective is undergoing renewal and your direction is being solidified. Lastly, join the channel to maintain the link for those designated by destiny do not journey in isolation. They proceed as a unified group beneath the observation of the divine. Keep this in mind. The celestial beings are fully aware. They perceived your selection. They continue to discuss it. And the narrative of your affirmation has been integrated into the timeless hymn. Moreover, allow me to emphasize this point, your decision extends beyond your personal sphere. When you affirmed your commitment, restraints encircling your ancestral heritage started to fracture. The divine messengers observed it. They witnessed maledictions disintegrate. They noticed recurring behaviors shatter. You might not detect these changes immediately, but your offspring and their descendants will traverse routes cleared through your resolve. Reflect on this concept. A solitary pebble cast into a body of water generates waves that extend throughout the whole expanse. Your adherence functions as that pebble. The waves will expand farther than you can envision, influencing individuals you may never encounter. And the heavens rejoice because your affirmation is not solitary. It is expanding outward. Therefore, maintain your position. Allow your emotions to remain stable. You did not merely select for the present day. You opted for everlasting consequences. The celestial attendants are aware of it. The divine domain has noted it, and the course of events has been modified because you had the audacity to comply. Deep within you have always sensed that you stand apart from others. Even during attempts to assimilate, when you compelled yourself to chuckle at humor that failed to resonate with your essence, or when you endeavored to follow the broad avenue simply to evade scrutiny, an inner force opposed it. It was not insubordination. It was a summons. The heavens designated you well before you became conscious of it, and each effort to merge was countered by sacred resistance. You were never intended to blend into the ordinary, and the divine messengers recognized this. This explains why they felt no surprise when adversities pursued you more intensely than they did others. You may have pondered why companions appeared to enjoy carefree existences while you faced repercussions for each era. But it was not retribution, it was safe. When you bear a mission, the divine will not permit you to linger in the obscurity of averageness. You are distinguished, similar to an object preserved for sacred purposes. Even prior to comprehending your own value, picture a solitary tree amid a woodland. All surrounding trees appear identical, merging into a vast overhead covering. But this particular tree bears a mark from a bolt of electricity. It towers above the rest. Its limbs extend broader. Its outer layer holds the imprint of flames. That symbolizes you. Others might overlook the mark, but the heavenly beings notice it and understand that you have been selected to ascend beyond the woodland. Your uniqueness has frequently caused you distress. Individuals misinterpreted your intentions. Some withdrew without justification. Others murmured, doubting your intentions or ridiculing your convictions. And you experienced the pain of exclusion, questioning if a flaw existed within you. But in reality, their dismissal served as the heavens' guidance toward a new direction. If they had welcomed you, you might have adopted their habits. Instead, their rejection created the opportunity for the Almighty to shape you into a more substantial entity. Psalms chapter 1 verse 3 illustrates that such an individual resembles a tree positioned beside flowing waters, producing its yield at the appropriate time with foliage that remains vibrant. All their endeavors succeed. This describes your essence. Even amid shifting circumstances, even when scarcity envelops you, the foundations of your vocation draw nourishment from vital sources. That explains why you cannot fade like the majority. That clarifies why you distinguish yourself. There existed a female who sensed invisibility within her society. She offered petitions quietly dedicating her core to the divine, while those nearby disregarded her sorrows. What remained unknown was that her unassuming devotion was influencing lineages not yet in existence. Decades later, her progeny advanced with resilience she herself had never possessed. Heavenly messengers had perceived her commitment when nobody else did, and they were astounded by her tenacity. That female's account parallels yours. You likewise have borne concealed burdens that others fail to recognize, and the divine realm has not disregarded them. Chosen one. Possessing distinctiveness is not a burden. It is the emblem of your fate. You are comparable to a light source transported into a cavern. A resonance that reverberates amid quietude. A blaze that persists despite being saturated by precipitation. The celestial attendants identify this distinction, and it explains why they halted when you rendered your decision. They understood you had been separated, but even they were impressed by the profundity of your compliance. You might continue to contend with isolation, but seclusion has served as the nurturing medium for your fortitude, whereas others saturated their existences with commotion. You mastered the art of perceiving the subtle, gentle murmur, while others submerged their anxieties in diversions. You permitted your sorrows to evolve into supplications, and within those concealed spaces the bedrock of your fate was constructed. When the heavens designate an individual, they cannot stay concealed. You might attempt to suppress your radiance, but ultimately it emerges, and the obscurity surrounding you quivers. This accounts for why you have sensed the burden of conflicts that others avoid. You are not undergoing punishment, you are experiencing purification. Similar to precious metal in flames, your luster arises from the crucible of trials. The heavenly messengers have observed everything. They have witnessed your struggles, they have seen your ascents. They have noted you maintaining your stance when the foundation trembled below you. They recognized your uniqueness, but your endurance verified it unequivocally, and thus they observe with respect, aware that the divine influence rests heavily upon your existence. Your distinctiveness constitutes your fate. It is the indication that you were selected, the emblem that the heavens imprinted upon you, and although society may never completely comprehend, the divine does. The celestial attendants comprehend, and your narrative continues to develop beneath their scrutiny. There exist conflicts you have engaged in that remain invisible to everyone else. Expressions of joy concealed them. Daily tasks disguised them. Even those nearest to you were unaware of the load you bore. But the divine messengers were informed. They perceived the concealed confrontations those evenings when your thoughts formed a combat zone, and each notion attempted to pull you toward despondency. They saw you quivering beneath strain, yet declining to submit to the gloom. And they were amazed, because each unspoken triumph disrupted the ethereal environment more than you comprehended. It has consistently operated in this manner. The concealed holds more importance than the apparent. Society perceives marks on the exterior, but the heavens notice wounds on the inner self. Individuals commend achievements, but the divine celebrates sorrows that transform into petitions. People acclaim visible accomplishments, but celestial beings regard private adherence with admiration. Envision this scenario: a guardian positioned during the night while all others rest. Nobody expresses gratitude. Nobody offers acclaim, but his vigilance prevents adversaries from infiltrating the encampment. That illustrates your subtle opposition. Others experienced liberty because you were intervening, monitoring, and combating struggles through devotion. They might never realize their debt to you, but the divine recognizes that your efforts were not squandered. They evolved into declarations inscribed in ethereal script across the annals of perpetuity. Each instance you resisted the impulse to surrender a portion of your account was engraved more profoundly. The celestial multitudes observed, suspending their respiration, and when you elected to persist, their admiration intensified beyond their chance. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17 explains that our temporary and minor afflictions are producing for us a lasting splendor that greatly surpasses them. What you withstood quietly is not misplaced. It is being converted into perpetual magnificence, and that accounts for why the heavenly messengers regarded your difficulties with astonishment. They understood that splendor was emerging. Your concealed conflicts were never solely concerning you. Each time you battled privately, you were embedding resilience into the essence of those who follow you. Your descendants, your relatives, even those linked to you in spirit will stand more erect because you declined to collapse. The divine attendants are astounded because they perceive the expanding influence of your persistence reaching across eras. Chosen one, I need you to grasp something with the deepest part of your spirit, something that will shift the way you see every hard season you've ever walked through. Not a single prayer that escaped your lips through trembling vulnerability was ever ignored, lost, or treated as insignificant. Not one tear that fell in the silence of your bedroom at 2 a.m. was allowed to simply evaporate into nothing. Not one groan you uttered when words failed, not one desperate "God, please" whispered into your pillow was ever dismissed or deleted from the record. Every single one was caught, collected, and carefully stored like the rarest jewels in heaven's treasury. What the world threw away as worthless, heaven gathered as priceless. What people walked past without noticing, angels stooped to pick up with reverence. And now those very moments, those nights you thought nobody saw, are being fashioned into a crown of unbreakable glory that testifies forever you did not merely survive. You built a legacy of faith that will outlive empires. If this truth is striking a chord deep in your spirit right now, if something inside you is leaping, weeping, or standing taller, then I want you to do something deliberate, something powerful. Go to the comments section or wherever you respond and type these exact words. Angels witnessed this. Don't just think it. Don't just feel it. Declare it. Why? Because those 4 words are not casual. They are a prophetic proclamation. They are a stake in the ground. They are you rising up in the courtroom of heaven and earth to affirm that your pain was seen, your obedience was recorded, your refusal to quit was celebrated by beings who never blink, never sleep, and never forget. When you type "Angels witnessed this," you are reminding your own soul that you were never invisible. You are reminding every demonic witness that tried to mock you in the midnight hour that they lost. And you are handing a torch of courage to someone else, scrolling in silence, feeling forgotten, who will suddenly read your declaration and realize, if heaven saw them, heaven sees me too. Chosen one, never not. For 1 second doubt this. The angels of God are not impressed by gold diamonds, fame, or followers. They have watched kings rise and fall for millennia. What moves them to silence and awe is the beauty of a human heart that keeps choosing God when everything inside screams to give up. You already wear that beauty. It was forged in the furnace of quiet nights when no one was watching. It was hammered into shape every time you chose worship instead of worry, forgiveness instead of bitterness, truth instead of convenience. It was polished by tears, refined by fire, and set in place by the hand of God Himself. The world may still be blind to it. People may still overlook you, underestimate you, or walk right past the weight of glory resting on your life. But heaven is not blind. Heaven bows. Every time you walk into a room carrying that hidden crown of faithfulness, ranks of angels incline their heads in honor, not to you alone, but to the one who transformed your broken pieces into something eternally magnificent. Let me take it even deeper for you. When you type "Angels witnessed this," you are doing far more than leaving a comment. You are raising a banner over your life that can be seen in 2 realms at once. Naturally, it looks like simple letters on a screen. In the spirit, it becomes a blazing standard fluttering in the heavens, a victory flag planted on the exact ground where the enemy once claimed defeat. Every lying spirit that whispered, "No one sees, no one cares," it doesn't matter, is forced to stare at that banner and remember that they were wrong. Every angel who stood guard over you during your darkest battles lifts their sword in salute and declares, "Yes, we saw, we all saw, and we will never forget." Picture a courtroom where the case has been argued for years. The accuser has brought every piece of evidence, trying to prove you were insignificant, that your struggles were pointless, that your story would end in obscurity. Then witness after witness begins to stand. One by one they take the stand and say, "I was there. I saw the night they chose praise instead of suicide. I saw the morning they got back up after betrayal. I saw the moment they said, 'Not my will but yours,' when everything in them wanted to run." With every testimony, the accusations crumble. Truth is established forever. That is exactly what happens when you declare "Angels witnessed this." You are calling forth the witnesses heaven has already appointed, and their testimony silences every lie. And there is another layer, one that makes the angels smile even wider. Your obedience, your declaration, your refusal to stay silent becomes a ripple that turns into a wave. Someone reading this right now is sitting in the exact same darkness you once sat in. They feel forgotten. They are one breath away from giving up. Then they see your words. "Angels witnessed this." And suddenly faith ignites. Suddenly they realize their midnight is not invisible either. Suddenly they type the same declaration and the wave grows. One act of bold obedience in your birth courage, in 10, then 100, then thousands. This is the hidden multiplication of the kingdom. So do not stay silent, chosen ones. Do not treat this moment as ordinary. Rise up and type it, speak it, post it, declare it out loud if you have to. Let both heaven and earth hear it clearly. The battles did not destroy you. The tears did not disqualify you. The loneliness did not erase you. You are still standing, still believing, still carrying the fire. And an entire host of heaven, millions upon millions of warring, worshipping, wandering angels, leans forward in a unified voice to affirm, yes. We saw it all. We saw every second, and we are still applauding. Type it now. Angels witnessed this. Because the moment you do, another piece of your eternal crown clicks into place, and the ripple of glory goes further than you will know until you see it from the other side. Rejection possesses a method of penetrating more profoundly than any physical injury. You understand this intimately. Statements uttered in secrecy slice more sharply than blades. Opportunities denied, connections forsaken, entrances closed without rationale. Each episode left an imprint that nobody else could detect. And yet, while individuals distanced themselves, the heavenly messengers drew nearer. They were not surprised that you encountered dismissal. They were surprised by how you managed it. Rather than permitting resentment to contaminate your essence, you elected to maintain openness in your emotions. It is straightforward to respond in kind. It is straightforward to become unyielding, but you avoided that. The divine attendants observed the evenings when you elevated fractured supplications, not imprecations, toward the divine. They witnessed your weeping followed by forgiveness. That is what rendered them speechless, because they have observed innumerable essences collapse beneath the burden of disloyalty. But you selected the more demanding route. Imagine a pottery container impacted by rocks. One would anticipate fractures, openings, ruin. Yet instead, the container absorbs the force, and somehow its exterior grows more robust, its finish more luminous. That symbolizes you. What ought to have fragmented you has merely refined you, and the celestial beings continue to admire the enigma of such tenacity. Rejection, as agonizing as it may be, became your instructor. It taught you to distinguish the divine voice above human opinions. It removed the requirement for perpetual validation and propelled you toward the one whose approval remains constant. You discovered that mortal acclaim diminishes rapidly, but divine acknowledgement endures eternally, and the heavens themselves esteemed you when others overlooked you. Psalms chapter 27 verse 10 reminds us that even if my parents abandon me, the Lord will embrace me. This principle enveloped you like a protective barrier. Even when those most intimate turned aside, you were not forsaken. You were welcomed into an embrace more substantial than theirs. Embrace that never releases. The heavenly messengers comprehend the anguish of dismissal. They recall the descent of the rebellious one, the uprising that divided the divine realm, the sorrow of losing a comrade. They understand the heaviness of betrayal. That is why your persistence holds such profound significance. You did not allow dismissal to draw you into defiance. You permitted it to propel you nearer to the seat of power. They observed you selecting yielding over bitterness, adoration over grievance, and they remained in sacred stillness, astounded. Reflect on the figure of Joseph, cast into an abyss by his siblings. His pleas for assistance were ignored. His kin's dismissal appeared conclusive. But what humans intended for malice, the Almighty converted into purpose. The celestial attendants are familiar with Joseph's tale, and they perceive the identical pattern integrated into yours. Your dismissal has served as the fertile ground where purpose flourishes. When you were excluded, you discovered profound fellowship with the divine. When entrances sealed, you uncovered openings of insight. When voices muted you, you gained the bravery to perceive the divine murmur more clearly than before. This explains why dismissal never genuinely demolished you. It redirected you, and that redirection is what celestial beings commemorate. Occasionally, you may question why me, why such numerous setbacks, so much misinterpretation, but the heavens perceive the broader perspective. They recognize that dismissal functioned as the sculpting instrument forming you into a container of esteem. They understand that disloyalty serves as the blaze purifying your essence. What individuals perceived as termination became the commencement of your disclosure. Envision once more a kernel interred, deeply isolated from illumination, compressed by dense earth to the surface realm. It appears neglected, but underneath in stillness it is fracturing open. Vitality is awakening. Shortly the kernel advances upward, penetrating the very terrain that sought to asphyxiate it. That kernel represents you. The dismissal was the interment, but your purpose is the emergence breaking forth. And the heavenly messengers cannot resist observing with admiration as vitality surfaces where demise was anticipated. You are not characterized by those who departed, by those who misinterpreted, by those who derided. You are characterized by the one who welcomed you, the Lord, personally. That constitutes the reality that celestial beings proclaim. Even currently, those who distanced themselves composed one narrative, but the heavens have composed another, and it is the superior narrative, chosen one. Your dismissal has transformed into your redirection. It is clear evidence that you were never intended to fit everywhere because you were distinguished for an elevated purpose. And while individuals may never fully grasp the complete burden of your path, the divine attendants do. They perceived it. They continue to perceive it, and they admire how you navigated through the depths of dismissal and emerged adorned in splendor. There arrives an instance in each path when you reach a juncture. One route is acquainted, expansive, filled with clamor, and populated by those who have selected simplicity. The alternative route is restricted, serene, and frequently solitary. The celestial messengers observed you positioned there. They inclined forward because they understood the difficulty of this selection. And then you directed your movements toward the confined path. Do you comprehend what occurred in that precise moment, the ethereal atmosphere altered? You did not merely select a course for yourself. You initiated a wave that influenced those nearby and even those who will follow. Your selection resounded into perpetuity. Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 19 proclaims that today I summon the celestial and terrestrial as observers against you, for I have presented before you existence and demise, favors and maledictions. Now select existence so that you and your offspring may thrive. This passage is not theoretical. It is what the heavenly beings witnessed it transpiring through you. You opted for existence. Even when demise seemed less complicated, you chose favor. Even when maledictions appeared inescapable and the divine was astounded, compliance is not simple. You comprehend its burden. You experienced its expense. At times it resembled forfeiture, like overlooked prospects, like sealed entrances. But the celestial attendants perceived something distinct. They saw restraints dissolve. They saw illumination erupt. They saw a selection so uncommon that it prompted the heavens to pause in esteem. Envision a rock hurled into a reservoir. The waves propagate outward, contacting areas the rock itself will never access. That symbolizes your compliance. Each resolution to honor the divine is a wave of radiance extending outward. Someone you may never encounter will experience the consequences of your loyalty. And for that reason, I wish to halt here and encourage you to contemplate alongside me. Click the approval icon so that others can discover this communication more readily. As if you are igniting a light source in obscurity for wanderers still seeking. Distribute this communication with someone you recognize is at their own juncture, because your distribution might serve as the vital support they require, like providing them a guide when they are disoriented. Join if you have not already, because these terms are not amusement, they are sustenance for the voyage. Fortitude for designated individuals who need to realize they are not proceeding in solitude. And permit me to express something gently from the core. If you sense guidance, you can also contribute. Consider it not as a duty, but as investing in the foundation that nourishes you, just as a cultivator places a kernel into the soil. Unaware of precisely how it will increase your contribution becomes a kernel. It assists this communication in extending farther. It nourishes the effort, so more designated individuals can discover resilience for their movements. But recall this, it is invariably optional, never compelled. Similar to the selection you made at the juncture, it must originate from your emotions. Contributing resembles adding fuel to a light. The blaze is already active, but the fuel renders it more vivid, more robust, enduring deeper into the darkness. Your assistance is that fuel. It does not acquire divine favor. His favor is already yours. It merely energizes the radiance so others in obscurity can discover their route. I convey this with softness because I understand how readily individuals can sense coercion. That is not my intention. Just as the Lord states, He appreciates a joyful contributor. So I express, if you experience delight in your emotions, to contribute, allow it to proceed. And if not, then permit your affirmation to the divine in alternative forms to be your presentation. Each act of compliance, whether in contributing and distributing or in quiet supplication, is valuable before the heavens. The celestial messengers serve as observers, not only to your difficulties, but also to your liberality. They recognize that each foundation planted in affection multiplies in concealed manners. They perceived how your selection at the juncture disrupted the hidden domain. And they will also perceive how your foundations, whether terms, supplications, or contributions, persist in expanding into perpetuity. So here is my straightforward motivation. Proceed in liberty. Select with delight. Recognize that your affirmation, in any shape it assumes, matters more than you can conceive. The divine attendants continue to observe. They persist in admiring. And the divine is still documenting. Your existence is not a minor narrative. It is not a concealed instant. It is a sacred account that persists in developing beneath the scrutiny of the heavens. Each selection, each deed, each contribution, each supplication, it forms part of the perpetual melody. And the heavenly beings cannot cease being astounded by the splendor of what the Almighty is achieving through you. When you affirmed your commitment to the divine, it did not solely modify your individual path. It dispatched waves through the whole ethereal domain. The celestial attendants perceived it. They witnessed the instant when your compliance sparked something intangible yet irreversible. What appeared as a basic resolution in the tangible exploded into vibrations in the concealed. It resembled igniting a spark in the profoundest cavern. The gloom had no option but to withdraw. Do you comprehend what transpired? Your compliance evolved beyond your personal declaration. It became a signaling blaze. Just as navigators during darkness search for the beacon to direct them, your selection illuminated the vista for others. Those who sense disorientation, those who question if it merits the effort, can now catch sight of your radiance and recognize there exists a way ahead. The divine messengers admired this. They are not astonished by divine might. They have observed His magnificence for ages. But they are astounded when a vulnerable mortal composed of earth and air selects his intention above their own. They comprehend how expensive compliance can be. And that explains why they inhaled sharply when you rendered that selection. Contemplate this representation. A lone stone released into a tranquil body of water. The rings disseminate far past where the stone descended. That symbolizes your affirmation. It disseminated through your kin, through your society, through the passage of time. You may not observe the external rings yet, but the heavens already perceive them. Hosea chapter 10, verse 12, urges to plant righteousness for yourselves. Harvest the produce of steadfast affection and cultivate your untouched terrain. For it is the moment to pursue the Lord until He arrives and bestows His righteousness upon you. This constitutes what your resolution became. A foundation of righteousness embedded in the soil, and the heavens perceived that the ground fractured open, prepared for precipitation. The celestial attendants observed the fracturing. They saw the terrain of your emotions, scarred from injuries, burdened from confrontations, commence to yield under your affirmation. They understood what that signified. A yield was approaching. And so they observed with admiration, murmuring to one another, "This individual has elected to cultivate the uncultivated terrain." Your expanding influence cannot be quantified by figures on a display or acclaim from individuals. It is assessed by perpetuity. A selection you rendered today might signify liberation for someone a decade hence. A forfeiture you rendered quietly may become the cause another essence discovers their return to the divine. The heavenly messengers perceive the extended perspective. They observe the forthcoming effect of your current compliance. This explains why they were stunned. Not because compliance itself is novel, but because your compliance in this instant unlocked entrances for numerous others. They remained motionless feathers, tucked attentive to the resonance of your affirmation echoing through the passages of duration. And now, I wish to encourage you into a basic, meaningful gesture. Proceed to the response area and enter the numeral 10. Why 10? Because Hosea 10:12 asserts that when you plant righteousness, you harvest unwavering affection. By inscribing 10, you are proclaiming that your compliance is not squandered, that you are embedding foundations into a forthcoming yield. You are stating, I elect to plant even when I cannot yet perceive the produce. And when you enter it, recall this. It is not concerning the numeral itself, but about what it signifies. The celestial messengers who observed your selection now observe your proclamation. They recognize that you are harmonizing yourself with the divine assurance of yield, and your terms, even in a remark, become part of that declaration. The hidden domain is not swayed by clamor. It reacts to compliance, and your affirmation has already disrupted more than you comprehend. Cling to that reality. Each wave matters. Each foundation counts. And the heavens have already inscribed your compliance into its perpetual documentation. Contemplate what occurs when precipitation finally descends on terrain that has remained arid for years. Initially, the soil opposes, but shortly the earth softens and foundations concealed long ago commence to stir. That symbolizes what your compliance has accomplished. The divine attendants perceived it. Your affirmation shattered the rigid terrain, and divine precipitation commenced to descend. Foundations that appeared neglected are awakening. Assurances that seemed postponed are beginning to revive. Entering the numeral 10 is more than emblematic. It is a proclamation that you trust the precipitation is arriving. It is you asserting the terrain will produce, the foundation will emerge. My compliance possesses significance. And when you inscribe it, you unite with an ensemble of other designated individuals whose affirmation is resounding into perpetuity. The celestial messengers persist in observing, still astounded, not because they question divine might, but because they esteem your bravery. Earth and air ventured to affirm, and in that affirmation the course of events shifted. Perpetuity inclined forward, and your identity was inscribed more profoundly in the narrative of the heavens. In the seat of divine authority, nothing escapes notice. Each gesture of conviction, each statement uttered in compliance, each sorrow released privately, it is all documented. The heavenly messengers observed as your resolution was inscribed into the volumes engraved with perpetual marking. They understood that this instant was not transient. It was enduring. A fresh entry was appended to your mission, an alteration that could never be removed. You might regard it as routine to you. It was merely a difficult selection, a painful advance, a murmured affirmation, but in the seat of authority, it was a thunderclap. Envision a recorder in the divine realm capturing every element. Your compliance was not merely observed, it was chronicled, and that chronicle bears importance in perpetuity. Malachi chapter 3 verse 16 mentions that then those who revered the Lord conversed with one another, and the Lord attended and perceived. A document of recollection was composed in his presence regarding those who revered the Lord and esteemed his name. Do you perceive it? The very gesture of esteeming the divine prompted a document to be composed, and the celestial attendants were there observing the engraving of your selection. Reflect on a judicial setting once more. Each account is noted, each verdict was chronicled. Nothing remains ambiguous. That is how the heavens manage your compliance. It is not entrusted to fortune, not preserved as a dim recollection. It is marked forever into the repositories of divine narrative. The heavenly messengers positioned near the seat observing the marking solidify on the divine documents. They understood what that signified. Nobody, not even the adversary, could erase it. The opponent may allege, individuals may question, but the chronicle endures. The heavens have proclaimed your selection legitimate, secured, perpetual. Contemplate this representation. A solitary celestial body etched into rock. Breezes cannot remove it, precipitation cannot dissolve it, and duration cannot diminish its imprint. That symbolizes what your compliance has become, an etching in the perpetual rock of divine history. The celestial attendants admired it because they recognized how uncommon it is for earth and air to leave such a mark. This chronicle is not merely about what you accomplished. It is about who you are evolving into. Your selection altered your essence. The heavens now perceive you not solely as a survivor, but as a bearer of fate. The divine messengers observe the conversion, a fatigued essence becoming a combatant, a nomad becoming an observer, a vulnerable one becoming a blaze. Even in stillness, the seat of authority echoed. The instant your affirmation was noted, authority amplified upon your existence. You may not sense it yet, but the chronicle itself bears weight. When the heavens document something, the earthly eventually harmonizes with it. What is inscribed above cannot be refuted below. At times you have sensed neglected, disregarded, even obscure, but the divine document demonstrates otherwise. The sovereign himself observed. He did not simply glance at your existence. He ordered it to be noted. The celestial attendants perceived it and inclined their heads, for they recognized how grave this engraving was. Imagine a repository boundless in extent, filled with documents and volumes, every page radiant with the blaze of divine recollection. Somewhere in that repository, your identity glows brightly, linked to the declaration of your compliance. And each time a celestial messenger passes, they recall what you selected. They recall how you persisted. They recall how you affirmed when everything within you desired to decline. This explains why your narrative cannot conclude in failure. The chronicle does not deceive. The marking of the heavens does not diminish. You have been secured into a history greater than your own, and the divine attendants will eternally remember the day your identity was etched more profoundly into perpetuity. So advance with this certainty. Your compliance is enduring. Your affirmation is perpetual, and the heavens themselves maintain the chronicle. While celestial messengers persist in admiring what the divine has inscribed through you. And permit me to clarify this distinctly. When the heavens inscribe something, it is not merely recollection. It is a mandate. A mandate bears authority. It resembles a seal impressed into sealing material, enduring and obligatory. The heavenly beings recognize this, and that explains why they remained in admiration. They comprehended that your selection had just transitioned from being an instant in duration to becoming a directive in perpetuity. Even if tempests arise, even if individuals question you, even if the adversary murmurs falsehoods, the document endures. Your identity is linked to a perpetual declaration that cannot be reversed. And when you position yourself in forthcoming conflicts, this chronicle will advocate for you. It will remind the heavens, the earthly, and even the infernal itself that you already selected. You already persisted. You already affirmed. And that affirmation continues to resound now. The adversary harbored one anticipation for you, that you would crumble. He constructed pitfalls, deceptions, and murmured allegations. Assured that eventually you would fracture, he examined your vulnerabilities, observed your habits, and positioned traps precisely where you would falter. Malevolent spirits encircled, persuaded that your descent was unavoidable. Yet the celestial attendants observed in stillness, awaiting the result. And then it transpired. You persisted. You ascended once more. You selected radiance over gloom, compliance over defiance, conviction over apprehension. The devil's anticipation fragmented like brittle material underfoot. Each time you held firm, each time you murmured a supplication, instead of yielding the schemes of the infernal unraveled, the heavenly messengers inhaled sharply because they recognized how meticulously the adversary had prepared your downfall, and they perceived how swiftly the divine converted it into your ascent. Contemplate a strategy board. The opponent advanced with deliberation, expecting triumph. He believed he had trapped you, but with one basic resolution you altered the whole contest. The divine attendants admired how a solitary advance of compliance outsmarted a legion of deceptions. What appeared as an endgame became a renewed opportunity, and the board shifted to your advantage. James chapter 4 verse 7 instructs to submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. That is precisely what occurred. You did not triumph by the vigor of your own capacity, but by yielding to the divine. The moment you held firm, the adversary relinquished his hold. He retreated, not because he desired to, but because divine authority compelled him. The celestial messengers were astounded at the rapidity of his withdrawal. Malevolent spirits who once derided you dispersed. Obscurity that once oppressed your core elevated. Falsehoods that appeared indestructible fragmented instantly. And the heavens recognized it was not your might, but your yielding that ensured the success. Envision a tempest pressing against a peak. The gusts bellow, the downpour whips. The rumble disrupts the atmosphere, yet the peak remains immobile. That symbolizes what your compliance resembled. The tempest arrived with rage, but you stayed unshaken, anchored in divine grasp. The devil anticipated deterioration, but instead the peak stood more elevated after the tempest subsided. There exists a cause the adversary focused on you so vehemently. He perceived what you bore. He dreaded what you would evolve into. He comprehended that your radiance was not solely for you, but for numerous others who would discover optimism through your narrative. That explains why he attempted to suppress it prematurely, to extinguish it before it could blaze more intensely. But your resolution to stay loyal guaranteed that the blaze could not be quenched. The heavenly messengers admired it because they recognized history was altering. The adversary's anticipation was not merely your descent. It was the descent of those who would have been motivated by you. But when you ascended, you bore them along. Your position became their optimism. Your persistence became their bravery. Even now, the infernal quivers at the recollection of your affirmation. They planned for your destruction, but instead your tenacity has transformed into a standard fluttering over the combat zone. You advance not as the vanquished, but as the one who demonstrated the devil erroneous. And each movement you make is a reminder that his tactics are vulnerable compared to divine strategy. Contemplate once more the perspective of the celestial attendants. They do not admire divine might. He has always been omnipotent. They admire yours the vulnerable fortitude of a mortal core, still selecting the divine despite anguish, still affirming despite apprehension. They perceived earth to defy obscurity. Pottery containers radiate with perpetual blaze, and they were touched. The adversary's unsuccessful anticipation is now part of your declaration. Each trap that failed to ensnare you, each falsehood that forfeited authority, each enticement that shattered before your determination, they all verify the reality. You are not readily disrupted, you are designated. And you have already overturned the adversary's schemes. So proceed in that consciousness. You do not bear failure. You bear success imprinted upon your essence. The divine attendants perceived it. The infernal recognizes it. And the heavens have secured it into your narrative. And permit me to clarify this distinctly. When the devil's anticipations collapse, it is not merely about you evading a snare. It is about a declaration being generated. The very location where he assumed you would tumble has become the location where others will ascend. Your marks, once concealed in quietude, are now emblems of mercy. The heavenly messengers perceived it. They recognize that each unsuccessful trap has converted into proof of divine loyalty. So when you reflect backward, do not solely perceive the anguish. Perceive the combat zone now imprinted with your success. What once seemed like vulnerability is evidence of fortitude. What once seemed like failure has become a foundation for splendor. The adversary anticipated destruction, but the heavens documented victory. You may question why this communication has arrived to you now at this exact instant. The reality is, it is not arbitrary. It is a meaningful affirmation. The heavens themselves coordinated the timing. The The celestial attendants who once admired your selection now serve as observers that you are receiving these terms because you are intended to recognize. Your affirmation has not escaped notice. Each detail of your path, each quiet supplication, each sorrow that evaporated on your resting place, they all constructed to this instant. The heavens desired you to recognize that your compliance was not squandered. You may have assumed you proceeded in isolation, but divine observers accompanied each movement. They documented it, they bore it, and now they remind you through this very communication. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 10 reveals that God is not unfair. He will not overlook your efforts and the affection you have demonstrated as you assisted His followers and persist in assisting them. Nothing you have accomplished in affection has been disregarded. The divine attendants perceived it. The Almighty Himself recalls it. And now this communication verifies it. At times you questioned. You doubted whether the heavens had truly observed. You pondered if your selections made in obscurity mattered to anyone. But affirmation has arrived. The celestial messengers not only observed, they were stunned, and their admiration persists to this day. This explains why you are receiving this communication now, because the timing is sacred. Envision a courier arriving at your entrance precisely when you require fortitude to continue proceeding. That symbolizes this instant. The terms you are receiving are not casual motivation. They are an indicator positioned by the heavens to assure you that you are on the correct course. The divine attendants serve as observers, affirming, saying, yes, we perceived it, yes, it mattered, yes, this one is designated. This explains why meaningful affirmation is potent. It does not present something novel. It discloses what has already been occurring in secrecy. You have been proceeding loyally, and the heavens have been maintaining documentation, but in the fatigue of anticipation you are required to hear it vocally. This is that instant. I desire you to perform something minor yet meaningful. Proceed to the response area and inscribe "Still Chosen." Why those terms? Because they proclaim reality. The heavens already recognize that regardless of the conflicts, regardless of the uncertainties, you remain designated. When you inscribe it, you resound what the celestial attendants observed. You verify on the earthly what is already secured in the divine. And recall, these meaningful terms are not merely motivation, they are harmonized. When you receive them, when you proclaim them, you advance more resolutely into the course the divine already delineated. You cease questioning, and you commence proceeding with certainty. That explains why the heavens desired you here. Receiving this now chosen one, this is your affirmation. Your existence is not unobserved, your selections are not forgotten, and your fate is still developing beneath the scrutiny of divine observers. Contemplate how an arbiter strikes the hammer in a judicial setting. The sound declares that the verdict has been rendered. The matter is resolved, and no additional contention can alter it. That symbolizes what meaningful affirmation does for you. It is the hammer of the heavens proclaiming the issue is settled. You are designated, and nothing the adversary murmurs can reverse it. The heavenly messengers heard the hammer strike. They recognized that your fate has already been secured. At times you felt suspended in anticipation, like a voyager positioned at a transit platform, uncertain if the conveyance would ever arrive. The quietude extended and uncertainty grew burdensome. But now the heavens have dispatched this communication as the conveyance arriving at the station. The anticipation was not squandered. It was ready. And the celestial attendants admire that you did not forsake the platform, but persisted observing, hoping, believing. Affirmation is also a reminder that your narrative is not detached. The divine messengers perceive the strands interweaving the supplications of your forebears, the assurances uttered long before your emergence, the selections you are rendering now. They perceive how each component interconnects, forming a mosaic that only the heavens could conceive. That explains why they were astounded at your compliance. It harmonized with something far more substantial than you comprehended. When you proclaim in the responses "still chosen," you are not simply reiterating terms, you are uttering a judgment over your existence. You are informing your uncertainties to subside. The verdict has been rendered. You are informing your history that it no longer characterizes you. You are informing your future that it is already safeguarded. And the heavenly attendants affirm, because they recognize these terms are authentic. So cling to this intimately. Meaningful affirmation is not the commencement of your narrative, nor is it the conclusion. It is the indicator along the route reminding you that you remain on the correct course. And the heavens are still observing with admiration. There exists something holy about bearing the divine aroma. The celestial attendants identified it on you the instant you rendered your selection. It is not an odor the world can replicate. It cannot be packaged or marketed. It is the scent of compliance, the essence of yielding, and it lingers wherever you proceed. Others may not comprehend it, but the intangible domain does. Malevolent spirits retreat from it because they cannot endure the bouquet of conviction. Heavenly messengers approach it because it evokes the offering ascending before the divine seat. And the heavens take pleasure in it because it is proof that your core belongs to the Lord. Contemplate a blossom in a secluded ravine. Nobody traverses to witness it flourish. No mortal sense inclines to inhale it. Yet the blossom unfolds regardless, dispersing its aroma into the atmosphere. That symbolizes what your existence has been. Compliance in secrecy, yielding when nobody applauded, adoration when nobody observed. The aroma reached the divine and the celestial attendants absorbed it with admiration. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 15 states that for we are to God the delightful scent of Christ among those who are being rescued and those who are perishing. That is what you bear. When you enter a space, intangible realms alter because the essence of Christ resides upon you. And this aroma is not solely for you. It imprints your offspring, your kin, your society. Just as the scent of baked goods permeates an entire dwelling, your compliance disseminates farther than you comprehend. Individuals meet you and cannot explain why they experience tranquility, why they detect optimism, why they abruptly yearn for the divine. It is the aroma of compliance adhering to you. Now permit me to halt here and converse with you intimately. If this communication is connecting with you, if you sense the reality of it awakening deeply within, then allow your reaction to be part of that aroma. Click approval as though you are permitting your affirmation to ascend like an offering. Distribute this communication as if you are transferring a light to another essence lost in gloom. Join if you have not yet, because designated individuals are not intended to proceed in isolation. They assemble like a botanical collection where each blossom contributes to the aroma. And if your inner being feels awakened, permit me to encourage you softly. Contemplate contributing. Not from coercion, not from duty, but as an extension of the scent you already bear. Contemplate it this way. When a cultivator shatters a container of lubricant over the terrain, the odor fills the atmosphere and shortly the area yields produce. Your contribution is like that container. It adds aroma to the effort, permitting the foundations of this communication to disseminate farther. Contributing is never an acquisition. It is a presentation. It resembles dispensing moisture onto parched terrain. The terrain already exists. The foundation is already embedded. But your moisture guarantees the development extends farther and endures longer, and the aroma increases. Each essence touched becomes another blossom unfolding in the ravine. I convey this with softness because the Lord Himself never compels. He encourages. He anticipates. He provides space for the core to react freely. And so this encouragement is only that, an encouragement. If delight arises in your core, allow it to overflow into deed. If not, recognize this. Your supplications, your attendance, your affirmation are already exquisite presentations. The heavenly messengers perceive the aroma you release. They have observed it ascend from concealed locations, from evenings of sorrows, from mornings of fatigued conviction, and they admire still, because such splendor cannot be fabricated. It can only be generated from yielding. So, whether your presentation is a supplication, a term of motivation, a contribution, or simply the activation of a control to distribute this communication, the aroma is authentic. It matters. It endures into perpetuity. Chosen one. Never question this. you bear the divine aroma. The celestial attendants recognize it, the infernal dreads it, and the heavens take pleasure in it. Proceed forward, dispersing that aroma wherever you travel. And recognize that perpetuity itself is imprinted by the splendor of your affirmation. And here is the enigma. Your aroma is not transient. Essence in the world diminishes after periods, but the scent of compliance intensifies with duration. The divine attendants inhale it repeatedly, amazed that earth and pottery could disperse such sweetness. Each gesture of conviction, each selection of yielding adds another stratum to the odor. When you enter a space, you bear the heavens with you, and long after you depart, the aroma persists, reminding all of perpetuity that you are designated when you render your selection. It was not solely about your own liberation. The heavenly messengers perceived something larger. They observed restraints that had encircled your ancestral heritage commenced to fracture. Maledictions murmured across eras started to disentangle. Cycles that appeared unalterable fractured under the burden of your compliance. This explains why the celestial attendants admired. They recognized the background. They perceived the conflicts of your predecessors, the ones who endeavored but never escaped. They recalled the instance when compromise appeared simpler, when obscurity transferred like a legacy. And then they turned to you, descendant of their lineage, heir of their structure, but bearing a distinct essence. They perceived you affirm where others declined. They perceived you depart from patterns that imprisoned others. Contemplate a linkage extended across centuries. Each segment forged by reiterated selections, hammered by reiterated transgressions, fused by reiterated compromises. To the ordinary observer, it appears indestructible. But then, with one impact, one flash of radiance, one gesture of compliance, the linkage breaks. That symbolizes what the divine attendants perceived. And their admiration was not merely at the fracturing. It was at the one who ventured to raise the tool. Nahum chapter 1 verse 13 announces that, "Now I will shatter their restraint from your neck and rip your bonds away." This term, though archaic, became vibrant the moment you selected differently. The restraint that oppressed your heritage was elevated, and the bonds were torn asunder. The heavens celebrated and the celestial messengers admired because they had perceived how long those linkages had gripped. Your compliance did not erase the history, it redeemed it. What was once disgrace became a declaration. What was once vulnerability became fortitude, and the divine attendants murmured among themselves, "This one has altered the narrative of a lineage." Contemplate a stream that has flowed in the identical direction for eras. Abruptly, a rock redirects its flow. Initially, the alteration seems minor, just a disturbance at the exterior. But over duration, the entire current is modified, carving a fresh route through the landscape. That symbolizes what your compliance has accomplished. It redirected the flow not solely for yourself, but for those who will follow. The heavenly messengers admire the concealed repercussions. They perceive the offspring who will arise more robust, the kin who will proceed more freely, the expressions that will proclaim because you elected to shatter quietude. They perceive the unborn receiving favors instead of maledictions, and they cannot resist halting, astounded by how one affirmation can transform eras. You may sense the burden of conflicts that were not yours initially. You bore injuries from selections you never rendered, burdens from transgressions you never committed. Yet instead of being overwhelmed, you persisted. And in your persistence, the celestial attendants perceived the history curve. They perceived maledictions collapse and favors awaken. Contemplate this representation, a foundation buried beneath stones. Year upon year, it endeavors to develop, but the weight overhead keeps it suppressed. Then one day, a fissure opens. Illumination enters. The foundation advances upward with fortitude it never knew it possessed. And against all probabilities, it penetrates. That foundation symbolizes you. Your advancement is the commencement of a fresh woodland. The divine attendants persist in observing because they recognize the narrative is still developing. Ancestral linkages do not collapse quietly. They collapse with resonances. The resonance of your compliance will persist in ringing for years ahead. And though you may not hear it yet, the heavens hear it. and the celestial messengers incline their heads in respect. So do not underestimate what has transpired. Your compliance has done more than alter your existence. It has rewritten the narrative of your heritage. The heavenly messengers are observers to this. Still in admiration of the alteration, still admiring the bravery that ventured to shatter what appeared indestructible. And permit me to develop this even more profoundly. When a linkage breaks, it does not solely liberate the one constrained. It also dispatches a sound through the atmosphere. The divine attendants heard it. That sound resembled a clarion blast declaring liberation, not solely for you, but for every existence connected to yours. They recognized that history itself had shifted, that what once imprisoned eras now lies fractured at your feet. This explains why you must never minimize your selection. You are not simply enduring, you are trailblazing. You are the one who navigated a turn others thought unattainable, and because of that Eris, yet unborn, will deem you favored. The celestial messengers remain astounded, not just at what fractured, but at who ventured to ascend and make it occur. When you affirmed, the heavens did not leave you to proceed in isolation. Fresh directives were issued in the seat of authority. The heavenly messengers who had positioned observing and admiration received novel missions. They were sent forth like electricity, bearing commands inscribed in flames. Safeguard, direct, fortify, encircle. What you sensed as abrupt tranquility amid disorder was no coincidence. What you observed as unforeseen supply and entrance opening where none existed was no happenstance. These were responses borne by couriers, rapid as the breeze, compliant to the sovereign's order. The celestial attendants who once admired your selection are now activated to protect that selection and ensure it flourishes. Psalms chapter 91 verse 11 declares that for he will order his angels regarding you to protect you in all your paths. That term was not just composed for archaic times. It is active now over you. The divine messengers receive their directives and they are executing them with accuracy. Envision a force advancing at the sound of a clarion. The warriors do not delay. They recognize their leader's voice. That symbolizes how the celestial attendants react when the heavens release fresh instructions over your existence. They advance into formation, encircling you, unseen yet indisputable. You may not comprehend how frequently you have been supported. The mishap that never materialized. The evening you sensed oddly shielded. The fortitude you discovered when you should have crumbled. These are not arbitrary instants. They are proof that fresh missions were inscribed in your favor. The heavenly messengers perceive the burden of your affirmation, and now they proceed beside you to safeguard its produce. Envision traversing a bustling marketplace, crowded and noisy, yet realizing you are never pushed too severely, never overwhelmed by the throng. That intangible buffer is how the divine attendants maneuver around you, generating space, deflecting impacts, directing your movements. You proceed, but you are never solitary. And here is the enigma. Your compliance did not solely summon messengers to observe, it summoned them to operate. They are not inactive viewers, they are engaged contributors in your narrative. They precede you, removing barriers. They position behind you, sealing entrances that would lead to injury. They encircle you, bearing divine directives to maintain you steady on the course designated for you. This explains why the celestial attendants remain astounded. They recognized compliance mattered, but they also recognized that your affirmation would initiate a mobilization in divine ranks. They perceived their directives to alter the moment you selected differently, and they have been pursuing those directives ever since. Now I encourage you to mark this instant in a meaningful gesture. Proceed to the response area and inscribe the numeral 11. Why? 11. Because Psalm 91:11 proclaims the assurance that angels are ordered regarding you. By entering 11, you are harmonizing yourself with that term, agreeing that divine force is not solely observing, but actively safeguarding your paths. When you inscribe it, recall, you are not summoning protection. You are recognizing it. You are proclaiming that the directives have already been dispatched, that divine force is already encircling you. The heavenly messengers perceived your selection, and now they bear your future like a standard. Chosen one, proceed with assurance. The seat of authority issued fresh directives, and divine couriers are operating on your behalf. You are shielded, you are protected, and your narrative is developing beneath their vigilant coverage. Contemplate how a herder extends his tool forward into the foliage. Before advancing, he recognizes peril can conceal where vision cannot penetrate. The celestial attendants are that tool. They advance ahead of you into locations you cannot discern, striking down dangers before they ever approach you. What appears to you as a seamless course is often a combat zone already cleared by intangible hands. The directives the heavens issued were not broad, they were individuals. Messengers are not dispatched with ambiguous guidance. They bear specific missions with your identity engraved on them. That explains why entrances closed that you once implored to open, because messengers in compliance to divine command sealed them to shield you. That explains why unforeseen prospects emerged from nowhere, because messengers obeying fresh instructions unlocked them for you. And each time you advance, those directives are renewed. The divine attendants do not fatigue, nor do they forget. Their astonishment at your compliance fuels their delight in executing their missions. They recognize they are safeguarding someone whose affirmation has altered history. So when you entered the numeral 11, you accomplished more than a remark. You recognized an intangible reality. You united divine agreement that your existence is under active guardianship. The heavenly messengers perceived your selection, received their directives, and are still operating swiftly to ensure nothing can reverse what the divine has secured. When the heavens direct their attention toward you, it is never for your esteem alone. The celestial attendants perceived this alteration. They comprehended that divine intent in elevating you is not to exalt your identity, but His. You were concealed for a period, unobserved, misinterpreted, even undervalued. And then, at the appropriate moment, the radiance of the heavens erupted over your existence. It was not abrupt to them. They had been observing the readiness all along. Each adversity, each isolated supplication, each unobserved gesture of compliance became the bedrock for this instant. The divine messengers admired not at the elevation itself, but at the procedure that led to it. They recognized that the terrain of modesty had been cultivated deeply in your essence. And that explains why the product of fate can now surface. Haggai chapter 2 verse 9 confirms that the splendor of this current structure will surpass the splendor of the prior one, says the Lord of hosts. And in this location I will bestow tranquility. These terms resound through your existence right now. What is being constructed in and through you will eclipse what preceded. Not because of your exertion, but because the heavens themselves have elected to exalt His name through your narrative. Contemplate a light concealed beneath a pottery cover. For years it appears faint, almost invisible. But when the covering is elevated, the radiance floods the space. That symbolizes what has transpired to you. The heavenly messengers perceived the covering elevated, and they observed radiance spill into locations that once resided in gloom. Your elevation is not for acclaim, it is for declaration. Individuals who once questioned you will soon perceive not your fortitude, but divine influence upon you. Those who ridiculed your determination will admire not your tenacity, but His loyalty. This explains why the celestial attendants position in admiration, because they recognize the alteration is not mortal accomplishment, but sacred designation. Contemplate how the dawn ascends. The darkness cannot oppose it. Shadows withdraw, not because they desire to, but because they must. In the identical manner, the instant the divine resolves to elevate you, resistance forfeits its foundation. The divine attendants perceived opposition disintegrate and paths open not by your capacity, but by His order. The decision of the seat of authority to raise you bears weight. It signifies resources are being aligned. Individuals are being positioned. Prospects are being awakened, and even resistance is being reshaped into readiness. You may sense the strain of it, but the heavenly messengers perceive the coordination of it. They admire how every component aligns at the utterance of one term from the sovereign. You must recall, however, that elevation brings accountability. The celestial attendants do not admire only at your ascending. They admire the cloak now resting on your frame. It is a cloak of sway not for personal gain, but for assistance. You are being positioned as a container, a channel of splendor. The heavens are not raising you to radiate alone, but to mirror radiance to many. Envision a light elevated in a dark cavern. The one grasping it can perceive, but so can everyone following. That symbolizes what your existence has become. The divine messengers perceive you bearing radiance not solely for yourself, but for those proceeding after you. This explains why the heavens had to ready you through concealment. If you had been elevated prematurely, the radiance might have been devoured by arrogance or diminished by immaturity, but now, shaped by ordeals, purified by dismissal, fortified by compliance, you are prepared. The heavenly attendants esteem the readiness because they recognize it was expensive. And now they observe as the divine raises you higher, not for position, but for observation. Your existence has become a platform where his splendor is exhibited. The celestial messengers perceive it. The heavens proclaim it, and the earthly will soon acknowledge it. Chosen one. Your elevation is not a coincidence. It is the disclosure of what the heavens always recognized. And though society may term it achievement, the divine attendants recognize it for what it truly is, a declaration to the splendor of the divine. And let this be distinct: when the divine elevates, he does so in such a manner that no one can misinterpret the origin. The heavenly messengers perceive it clearly. They recognize that the hands which once quivered in vulnerability now bear fortitude not their own. They recognize that the voice which once murmured in the darkness now utters with authority, born of the heavens. Your ascent is not for acclaim, but for effect. Each step upward is a platform where his name resounds more clearly, and each gaze that rests upon you is being guided to the splendor of the sovereign. The infernal does not remain quiet when the heavens crown a designated one. The celestial attendants perceived it distinctly the moment your compliance transformed into declaration. Envy ignited in the domain of gloom. Malevolent spirits that once ridiculed your difficulties now quivered at your persistence. The adversary who schemed your downfall now seethes, unable to account for your ascent. The envy of gloom is not like mortal jealousy. It is aggressive, acrid, and agitated. The adversary recognizes he has forfeited something he believed he possessed. He assumed your heritage was his. He assumed your core would eventually belong to him. He assumed your selections would echo compromise. But when you positioned yourself for the divine, his assertion was shattered. The divine messengers perceived this collapse and admired it, because the infernal rarely forfeits what it believes it owns. Contemplate this. A pilferer guarding pilfered valuables grows conceited. He regards it as his, displays it as his until the legitimate possessor arrives and demands it back. That symbolizes what your compliance accomplished. It verified you belong to the heavens, not to the infernal. The pilferer forfeited his assertion, and the heavenly attendants celebrated at his humiliation. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17 asserts that no instrument formed against you will succeed, and you will disprove every accusation leveled against you. This is the inheritance of the Lord's servants, and this is their justification from me, declares the Lord. The infernal may cultivate envy, but it cannot triumph. Instruments may be created, but they cannot flourish. The celestial attendants admired how every endeavor failed. They perceived the webs laid for your steps, yet you proceeded past them. They perceived the projectiles aimed at your core, yet they rebounded off the barrier of conviction. They perceived the tempests intended to submerge you, yet you emerged drenched in splendor. Each failure of infernal schemes became greater proof of divine safeguarding. Envision a blaze intended to devour timber, but instead it purifies precious metal. That symbolizes what the envy of gloom has accomplished. The assaults that should have demolished you refined you. The falsehoods that should have muted you deepened your belief. The tempests that should have shattered you only disclosed the fortitude the divine placed inside you. This explains why the heavenly messengers remain astounded. They recognize how fierce the assaults have been, how relentless the adversary has combated. and yet they perceive you persisting. They perceive you radiating more brilliantly, not faintly. They perceive you bearing tranquility where apprehension should have dominated. To them, it is a marvel beyond expression. The envy of gloom is an indirect confirmation of your essence. The adversary does not waste his rage on the commonplace. He reserves his most intense conflicts for those imprinted with fate. The more he seethes, the more he verifies who you are. The divine attendants recognize this and murmur to each other. If the infernal is this envious, it is because this one bears great importance. Even in their fury, the forces of obscurity serve a concealed purpose. Each strike they deliver only engraves your declaration deeper. Each projectile they launch only verifies your barrier is authentic. Each tempest they dispatch only amplifies the foundation on which you position. The heavenly messengers perceive this irony and are touched by the insight of the divine that even envy becomes fuel for your ascending. Do not misinterpret the intensity of assault for abandonment. It is in fact evidence of the heavens' imprint upon you. The celestial attendants have observed enough conflicts to identify this pattern. The most intense wars belong to the most designated ones. Your persistence is proof that the divine has entrusted you with more than you conceived. So let the envy of gloom rage. Let the tempests bellow. They cannot rewrite the narrative the heavens have already secured. The divine messengers perceived your compliance. They perceived the fury of the infernal, and they now perceive your tenacity. To them, it is a living declaration that radiance always conquers obscurity. Chosen one, the jealousy of the infernal is simply the resonance of your success. Wear it as proof that you are adorned, secured, and borne by the heavens themselves. And comprehend this distinctly. Jealousy in the infernal is not an indication of your vulnerability, but of your importance. The heavenly messengers recognize that each time gloom rages, it is because something unshakable has been embedded in you. The rage of the adversary is a reflection mirroring the fortitude of your summons. If there was nothing in you worth dreading, the infernal would have abandoned you long ago. So the very resistance you encounter is in truth an adornment placed upon your head. It declares that you have become invulnerable in the ways that matter most. And the celestial attendants keep observing astounded, as each new surge of jealousy only discloses more of divine splendor radiating through you. The divine attendants are not solely observers to your conflicts. They are also observers to the light you now bear. They have perceived how the blaze inside you was not loaned from mortals, but ignited by the divine breath. They perceived when it wavered in tempests, when the gusts of dismissal nearly extinguished it. Yet you shielded it with quivering hands and murmured, "I will not release." And now the blaze burns more intensely than ever. You are a light bearer, not because you pursued a platform, not because you chased acknowledgement, but because the heavens placed radiance within you that refuses to perish. The heavenly messengers admire this. They recognize how much obscurity tried to suffocate it, yet they perceive you advancing, radiance held elevated, directing others who falter in the darkness. Philippians chapter 2 verse 15 encourages, "So that you may become faultless and untainted offspring of God, without blemish in a distorted generation. Then you will radiate among them like celestial bodies in the firmament." That symbolizes what the divine attendants perceive in you. A celestial body blazing in a firmament of shadows, a light elevated in a twisted era. And here is the enigma. Your blaze is not solely for you. It is for the fatigued who proceed behind you. It is for the shattered who yearn for guidance. It is for the searchers who question if radiance still exists. You are evidence that it does. Now, permit me to halt. Not to order, but to encourage. If this communication resonates with your inner being, click approval. Not as an activation, but as a method of adding fuel to your blaze, permitting it to burn higher where others can perceive. If you distribute this communication, contemplate it as transferring your light into another grasp, illuminating the route for someone who is meandering. When you join, it resembles stepping into an assembly of light bearers, where many blazes together create a conflagration that no gust can quench. And if your core feels awakened, you may elect to contribute not as an exchange, but as a holy gesture. Envision a voyager dispensing a portion of their moisture into the blaze, not to extinguish it, but to generate vapor that ascends upward, bearing the odor of forfeiture. That symbolizes what your contributing does. It does not acquire divine favor. It amplifies the aroma of compliance, rendering the blaze visible farther than before. Your assistance is not required. It is encouraged. Like a foundation dropped into fertile terrain, it multiplies quietly. Like a stream nourishing an illuminated settlement, it sustains the radiance. If your inner being rejoices in the notion of investing into this blaze, let it be your delight. If not, recognize that your affirmation to the divine in other shapes is no less exquisite. Each gesture of compliance, whether a contribution, a term, or a supplication, is fuel for the light. The celestial attendants observe it all. They perceive the blaze, you protect the movements you make, the embers you transfer to others, and they are astounded that a container of pottery bears such a conflagration without being devoured. They admire it because they recognize what it costs to maintain a blaze alive in the tempest. Yet you have accomplished it, and your radiance has not diminished. So permit your light to ascend higher. Advance not for acclaim, but because the world requires the radiance you bear. The divine messengers already recognize the reality. You are a designated light bearer, adorned not with precious metal, but with blaze secured not with designations, but with radiance. And as you persist, recall each blaze you distribute becomes another signal, another declaration, another wonder that obscurity cannot erase. And permit me to guide you deeper. A light bearer does not proceed solely for themselves. They proceed for the procession following. Each movement you make illuminates the terrain for someone else's steps. The heavenly messengers admire because they perceive what you cannot, the visages of those who will never falter in the same obscurity simply because your blaze shone when theirs had extinguished. Even more, your blaze is not vulnerable. It has been examined in precipitation, assaulted by gusts, nearly quenched by tempests, yet it endures. Why? Because it is not solely your blaze. It is the heavens' blaze entrusted to you. The celestial attendants bow in admiration at this enigma. Pottery bearing blaze. Vulnerability bearing authority. A container once fractured is now luminous with radiance, so never minimize your role. The light you bear is holy, and its glow extends farther than your vision can perceive. Elevate it higher, recognizing that each flicker becomes part of a greater conflagration destined to ignite eras. The divine attendants have perceived something that society has not yet observed. You have already been adorned. The adornment was not placed on your head before a gathering, nor was it fashioned by mortal hands. It was bestowed in the serene chambers of the heavens, where the sovereign himself proclaimed your value, while individuals saw only your difficulties. The heavens perceived your determination, and in secrecy the adornment was positioned upon you. This adornment is unlike any terrestrial reward. It does not sparkle with gems extracted from the earth. But with triumphs won in concealed conflicts, each sorrow became a jewel. Each gesture of compliance became a stone. Each hidden forfeiture became precious metal fused into the circle. The heavenly messengers positioned around as it was placed upon your head, astounded that such splendor could belong to one who proceeded so often in quietude. James chapter 2 verse 26 notes that as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without actions is dead. The celestial attendants perceived your conviction come alive through deed. They recognized your adornment was not a recompense for empty belief, but for conviction that proceeded endured and complied. Each step verified your conviction had vitality, and each vitality gave existence to your declaration. Envision an enthronement that no assembly attends, yet the heavens themselves bellow with approval. That symbolizes what transpired. The divine attendants did not require clarions to comprehend the weight of the instant. They felt it in their coverage in the atmosphere of perpetuity. The adornment was yours before anyone else could identify it. Your terrestrial existence may not yet reflect the grandeur of that adornment. You may still proceed in ordinary attire, reside in ordinary locations, grapple with ordinary difficulties. Yet above it all, the intangible domain recognizes the reality. You have already been imprinted as nobility. The adornment is not awaiting you at the conclusion. It has already been bestowed as a seal of who you are evolving into. Contemplate a foundation interred in terrain. To those proceeding above it appears as nothing just soil, silent and immobile. But beneath the exterior, roots are extending. Vitality is awakening. Fate is developing. That foundation bears the assurance of a tree even before it penetrates the ground. In the identical manner, your adornment is proof of what is already authentic in the heavens. Though society has not yet perceived it, the heavenly messengers admire the patience of this procedure. They recognize what is concealed will one day be disclosed. They recognize the adornment that rests invisibly now will radiate visibly later, and they bow their heads in admiration, not at the adornment itself, but at the bravery of the one who wears it without needing acclaim. This secrecy is deliberate. If the adornment had been exhibited prematurely, arrogance might have pilfered its luster. If it had been disclosed before those who ridiculed you, they might have misinterpreted its origin. But concealed in divine chambers, it remains unadulterated. The celestial attendants comprehend the insight of this timing, and they are astounded at how loyally you bear it. Unobserved yet unshakable. There will arrive a day when the concealed will be disclosed. The divine messengers recognize it. They have perceived glimpses of that disclosure. But for now they admire the splendor of secrecy, an adornment placed in quietude. Splendor born quietly, esteem woven into your essence rather than displayed before mortals. Chosen one, never under any circumstances misinterpret seasons of concealment as evidence of unimportance, insignificance, or divine oversight. What has been placed upon your head is no imitation crown, no temporary trinket, no earthly medal that fades with time. It is authentic, eternal, forged in the fire of heaven's own council chamber and set in place by the hand of the King himself. The angels saw the moment it happened. They were present when the oil of anointing was poured, when the mantle fell, when the heavenly seal was pressed into your spirit. And to this very day in the courts above, they still speak of it with hushed reverence, still bow when your name is mentioned, still marvel at the weight of glory resting on a human frame that once felt so ordinary. The world may not yet recognize the crown. Social media may scroll past you. Invitations may go to louder voices. Rooms may fill with people who see more obvious choices. But heaven has never operated by human metrics, and heaven has already cast its vote. That vote outweighs every award, every title, every follower, count, every bank balance, and every platform the earth could ever offer. Let that truth settle deep into your bones, like warm oil on a cold night. The fact that you are hidden right now does not mean you are forgotten. It means you are protected. The concealment is not silence, it is strategy. The heavens have always understood the sacred power of timing. A warrior does not march into the decisive battle, flashing every weapon before the trumpet sounds. A king does not ride through the streets proclaiming his coronation while enemy spies still lurk in the gates. In exactly the same way, the crown on your head remains unseen for now, not because it is imaginary, but because its full unveiling would be dangerous too soon. Premature exposure would invite premature attack. The enemy would rally every force to strip it away before you had grown into its weight. So God, in his fierce love and perfect wisdom, keeps it veiled until the exact moment you are ready to carry it without pride. Steward it without fear and release its authority without apology. The angels honor this process. They stand in awe of how you walk humbly, quietly, often painfully aware of your own weakness, yet refusing to manufacture visibility or force some open doors that heaven has wisely closed for now. They see what you often cannot, the blazing light that streams from your spirit, even on your darkest days, the royal insignia etched across your forehead in a language only the spirit realm can read. And every time you choose integrity over image, faithfulness over fame, kindness over being right, they exchange glances of wonder and bow lower, not to the crown itself, but to the one who deemed you worthy to wear it, and to the staggering humility with which you keep walking while wearing it unseen. When you feel hidden, misunderstood, or passed over, remind yourself this is not rejection, it is preservation. Divine timing has never been late, not once in all of history. The crown is secure. The decree is already written in books that cannot be altered. The revelation of who you truly are will break forth at the precise moment the world is least prepared to argue with it, and more importantly, at the moment you are most prepared to wear it with grace, wisdom, and unshakable love. The heavenly hosts have never stopped watching. Their admiration has only grown deeper, their wonder more profound. What began as a collective intake of breath at the moment of your choosing has become a never-ending anthem of reverence that echoes through the corridors of eternity. They are captivated because your calling was never a one-time event. It is an ever-unfolding revelation, a story still being written in fire and light, a melody that keeps adding harmonies the longer you walk with God. They see you moving forward now, crowned yet unseen, anointed yet unrecognized, carrying glory. The earth has not yet learned to measure, and they know what is coming. They have read the ending, and it is breathtaking. For every tear you cried in secret, storehouses of joy are being filled. For every door that slammed in your face, palaces are being prepared. For every whispered no you received on earth, 1,000 thundering yeses are already prepared in the courts of heaven. The book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 1, paints the picture with stunning clarity. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Those witnesses are not distant or detached. They are leaning forward from the balconies of glory, eyes fixed on you, hearts swelling with pride. This is not a cold stadium of judges waiting to see if you fail. This is a family of champions who already know the victory is sealed, yet cannot look away because they are so moved by the beauty of how you keep running, limping some days, weeping on others, laughing through tears on the best ones, but always moving forward. Imagine the scene. Every step you take reverberates through dimensions you cannot see. Every time you choose forgiveness after betrayal. Every time you praise in the midnight hour. Every time you give when your own hands are empty. Every quiet yes to God. When no one is watching, the angels add another note to their song. Your life has become a living performance that still takes their breath away. Nothing you do in obedience is ever wasted. Nothing is too small to be noticed. The cup of water given in Jesus' name, the prayer whispered over a stranger, the stand taken when it would be easier to stay silent. All of it rises like fragrant incense before the throne, and the heavenly council inhales it with delight. So carry this awareness with you, chosen one, like a secret flame against your heart. You are watched not with criticism, but with celebration. You are marked not for shame, but for glory. You are woven into a story so magnificent that even the angels lean in to see how the next chapter unfolds. And the best, the absolute best, is still ahead. The curtain has not yet risen on the fullest expression of who you were created to be. When it does, the same hosts who have watched you walk hidden will erupt in applause that shakes the heavens. Until then, keep walking, keep believing, keep wearing the crown no one else can see yet. The king is not finished, and neither are you. The finest, most glorious chapters are still to come.